And joining us now is Hannah Trudeau, senior political reporter with our partners at The Hill. Great to have you. So, as you know, the GOP field getting even bigger, many saying this will favor former President Donald Trump. How do you see things playing out?
Yeah, thanks, Kelly. That's like everybody has said in the last segment. I mean, New Hampshire is such a different state than Iowa. I could say that as a New Hampshire native, born and bred. It's a different base that the Republican candidates are going to have to appeal to there. Now, in Iowa, like you mentioned, former President Trump is right on the heels of a visit from the Florida governor, Ron DeSantis. And that's obviously not by accident. They want to draw very, very clear contrasts between their messages. Obviously, as Kelly Meyer said previously, this is the former president is feeling confident that he can win that state. Now, he didn't win in 2016. He's hoping for something different this time around for the caucus. But like you mentioned, I mean, the general electorate kind of population in the Granite State as opposed to Iowa, the Hawkeye State, it's a much more libertarian sort of bent. There are certainly those Trump Republicans that favor his message, but there's also a real streak of independence. We heard Florida Governor Ron DeSantis just the other day talking about how he wants to, quote, impose his will on Washington, D.C. And that's something that gives, I would assume, some New Hampshire Republicans kind of pause because they think, wow, you know, we are a, quote unquote, live free or die state. We don't want anyone imposing our will is the sort of sentiment over there. So it will be interesting to see how, as more and more candidates enter, how those two in particular draw contrast in a state that's quite frankly much less religious and much more independent.
Well, it'll be interesting to watch. So former Vice President Mike Pence is expected to announce his run next week. What do you think his messaging will be, and do you think it will resonate with voters?
So Mike Pence is a really interesting example because if there's anywhere that he is going to catch on, it will be Iowa. We've seen everything we've seen about the conservative, religious, Christian right religious base there. That's the kind of message that he would hope would resonate really with that population. And of course, it's an interesting dynamic. He's going up against his former number one in command there. And so that's going to be really interesting to see. I think that the evangelical base is really what Republicans, any of these candidates who are going to compete well in Iowa in particular, are going to have to appeal to. We saw that former President Trump is meeting with faith leaders today. I assume that Mike Pence will do the same. And he has more of a natural sort of finesse with that constituency. So it will be interesting to see the contrast, not just between Pence and the other candidates, but Pence and his former boss.
Certainly, that will be an interesting dynamic to watch. So the chief executive of JP Morgan Chase, Jamie Dimon, hinted at a potential presidential run. As you know, this is an extremely powerful player in corporate America. How might a candidate like Dimon change the dynamics of the field right now?
Well, it's interesting. I mean, I'd be curious to know if he's thinking of running as an independent or as a Democrat or even as a Republican. I think a lot of these questions remain to be seen, but that's sort of what everybody is wondering. I mean, I think back to 2020 when we had Mike Bloomberg, the huge behemoth candidate who folks for a minute were a little worried would challenge Biden or make a serious challenge to the Democratic nomination. So when we look at these financial kind of gurus and heavyweights here, I think it's interesting to see which lane they would compete in. Obviously, if he's talking about or thinking through a potential challenge to the Democratic sitting president, that's a whole different story than if he is potentially jumping in the race as a Republican candidate, one of which we are now seeing, of course, a crowded field. And I think, you know, he would have to contend with Trump.
Yeah, that would make a big difference which side of the aisle he'd be on. Hannah Trudeau, thank you for weighing in. We appreciate it.
Thank you for watching. Go to newsnationnow.com to find News Nation on your television provider. And don't forget to click the red subscribe button below to get more of News Nation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.